I fell flat on my face in front of everyone. Food splattered all over my shirt, and my brother's laughter was the only sound echoing in the dead-silent room. A burning sensation spread from my face down my neck, from the ultimate humiliation as 12 pairs of eyes stared at me. A 35-year-old man whose own brother had just tripped during Thanksgiving dinner. This wasn't just a mean prank, but the climax of 30 years of built-up conflict between two brothers. None of us expected that pulling the chair away would lead to a decision that would change our entire family's fate from the most powerful man in the house. A brief moment had shattered the fake harmony we'd maintained for years. Before getting into the details of this story, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen today. Hello everyone, I'm Gregory Wilson, 35 years old. The story I'm telling today happened last Thanksgiving, a day I'd been mentally preparing for weeks. On Thanksgiving morning, warm sunlight filtered through the kitchen window curtains as I prepared the traditional salad and cornbread to bring to my parents' house. The small kitchen was filled with the aroma of hot butter and cornmeal. From the living room came background music and the sounds of the video game Alex, our 8-year-old son, was playing. A privilege reserved for holidays or weekends when he finished his homework. While I was focused on peeling apples, Amanda placed her hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of concern. My wife gently said, "Honey, this year, try not to let Kevin bother you. You know your brother always likes to cause trouble." Right then, I sighed, a heavy feeling weighing on my chest. I've tried hard, but every time we meet, Kevin always finds ways to mock my teaching career. Like earning $52,000 a year makes me worth so much less. Putting the knife down, I told Amanda about our childhood, when Kevin always lived in my shadow. Grades, science awards, and college scholarships. All those achievements put a burden of expectations on Kevin's shoulders. Robert and Linda, our parents, though they meant no harm, always compared us. "Why don't you try like Greg? Your brother did it. Why can't you?" Those words planted seeds for decades of resentment. After a moment of silence, I continued, "Ironically, now Kevin makes 3 times my salary with his real estate business, and he never lets me forget it." As soon as I finished, Alex looked up from his game, his young eyes containing surprising understanding. "Dad, I don't like Uncle Kevin. He always says things that make you sad." Right then, Amanda sat down next to Alex, gently saying, "Uncle Kevin doesn't mean any harm, sweetie. Sometimes adults have strange ways of showing their feelings." Turning back to me, she whispered in my ear, "You're still worried about the family house, aren't you?" I nodded. The house in suburban Cincinnati, where 3 generations of the Wilson family had lived, was always a source of tension. Kevin didn't hide his ambition to own it someday, even though it was where I had all my childhood memories. As we packed things into the car, Amanda took my hand, her eyes conveying strength. "Please stay calm today. For Alex, for all of us." I forced a smile, though I knew deep down it was almost impossible. After more than 40 minutes of driving, we finally arrived at the 2-story house, the place that held countless childhood memories. The familiar wooden steps creaked under our feet, welcoming us like old friends. Looking at the straight row of green pines along the walkway, my heart filled with warmth mixed with anxiety. Throughout my life, I'd never longed for luxury. I'd yearned only for a harmonious family despite our personality differences. But not everything we wish for comes true. As soon as I knocked, my dad opened his arms wide. His blue eyes lit up when he saw us. He warmly said, "Greg, you're here. Your mom's been eagerly waiting for the whole family in the kitchen." Linda, my mom, with her neatly pinned gray hair, ran out from the kitchen, still wearing baking gloves. She emotionally hugged Alex tight, joyfully telling her grandson, "Oh, my dear boy, you've grown another inch. You're almost as tall as your dad." While we were exchanging everyday conversation in the cozy living room with the cinnamon scent from candles, a jarring sound suddenly cut through our chat. The sound of a Porsche engine roaring shattered the peaceful atmosphere, announcing Kevin's arrival, the brother who always had to grab attention, always had to be different. In just moments, Robert had rushed to the door, his eyes strangely bright, eyes I rarely saw him give me. Kevin walked in wearing a dark Armani suit, holding a bottle of vintage whiskey and an elaborately wrapped gift bag. His hair was perfectly slicked back, and his smile was so bright it seemed fake. After hugging our parents, Kevin approached me, slapped my shoulder hard, and said mockingly, "Greg, is your old Camry still running well? You know, with a teacher's salary, you should be careful with maintenance to make it last." I felt my jaw tighten, trying to suppress the rising anger. Amanda squeezed my hand gently, like a reminder of my promise to stay calm. Robert quickly intervened, trying to mediate with a cheerful tone. "Both my sons are successful in their own ways. Greg, you're changing many students' lives, and Kevin, you're building a business empire." However, the proud look he gave Kevin couldn't be hidden. It was the look reserved for the child who'd proven his worth through things society could easily measure, money and status. Suddenly, Kevin turned to Alex and handed him the gift bag. "For my nephew here. I know you like technology." Alex eagerly opened the gift and exclaimed with excitement when he saw the latest AirPods Pro box. In that moment, I felt betrayed. Our family always had rules about gifts, not because I was stingy, but because I wanted Alex to understand that a thing's value doesn't just come from its price. I gently but firmly said to Kevin, "Kevin, we have rules about expensive gifts for Alex, you know that." Right then, Kevin waved his hand, dismissing me. "Oh, come on. My nephew deserves the best things. It's not his fault if his dad's too rigid." Alex, though initially excited, quickly sensed my discomfort. The boy put the box down, his eyes wavering between joy and worry. Sensing the rising tension, Linda quickly clapped and warmly invited, "Now, dinner's ready. Everyone, come to the dining table." As we moved to the dining room, Kevin kept talking about the $1 million real estate deal he'd just completed, constantly glancing at me, as if wanting to say, "Can you compare?" When everyone sat at the dining table, I had no idea that the chair I was about to sit in would become a symbol of the collapse of all pretense of harmony in our family. That Thanksgiving dinner was probably one I'll never forget in my life. The night when the silent cracks in our family finally broke open, leaving wounds that time could hardly heal. The dining room was filled with the aroma of pumpkin pie and roasted turkey, the chandelier light shining on the china set my mom used only for special occasions. Everyone sat gathered around the long table covered with an orange tablecloth. Robert took Linda's hand, then signaled for the whole family to hold hands, forming a circle. His deep, warm voice rang out in the quiet space. "Let's give thanks for the blessings we've received this past year, and especially for this precious moment when our family is reunited today." When the prayers ended, I quietly hoped dinner would go smoothly. However, that hope quickly vanished when Kevin started talking endlessly about his new Rolex and upcoming trip to the Maldives. With each story Kevin told, I noticed my parents' admiring looks toward my brother. I told myself to control my emotions, carefully cutting the turkey on my plate into small, even pieces, as if it required absolute concentration. Right then, Uncle John turned to me, asking friendly, "Greg, how's school? What grade are you teaching this year?" Before I could answer, Kevin had chimed in sarcastically, "Oh, Greg's still just teaching bratty kids for starvation wages, right?" I felt my throat dry and my jaw tense. Looking at Amanda, I saw my wife gripping her fork tightly, trying to suppress anger. I shook my head slightly, signaling her not to react. Finishing the water in my glass, I set it down and gently said, "I'll get more water. Everyone enjoy your meal." When I left the dining table, for a moment, I heard whispering. Turning back, I saw Kevin leaning close to Alex's ear, my son's expression changing from curious to confused. An uneasy feeling passed through me, but I couldn't guess what Kevin was plotting. And that's when everything started. When I returned with a full water pitcher, Kevin suddenly stood up, wearing that smile I knew well, the smile that appeared whenever my brother was about to cause trouble. My heartbeat raced, but reason told me we weren't kids anymore. Surely Kevin wouldn't do anything too outrageous in front of everyone. That was my biggest mistake. Right as I set the water pitcher on the table and prepared to sit down, Kevin quickly pulled the chair away. The feeling of free fall left me dizzy. I fell backward onto the hard wooden floor, sharp pain shooting up from my tailbone. The water pitcher in my hand splattered everywhere, soaking my clothes and part of my mom's antique Persian rug. My plate of food flew off, mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce splashing on my face and shirt collar. Kevin's triumphant laughter rang out in the suddenly silent room. He pointed at me, gleefully declaring, "Oops, sorry bro, no room for poor teachers anymore." Time seemed to freeze. I could feel every drop of cold water seeping through the fabric, every stare directed at me, and especially Kevin's laughter still echoing in my ears. My face burned hot, not from pain, but from searing humiliation. Each person in the room reacted differently, like a still painting of intertwined emotions. Aunt Helen and her husband froze mid-bite, not knowing whether to laugh or be serious. Uncle Phil stared at his wine glass, as if searching for an answer to an invisible question. My two cousins looked at each other, awkwardly not knowing what to do. My mom's face went pale, her aged hands covering her mouth as if to stop a gasp of shock. She looked to Robert for help, but my dad was also frozen, his eyes wavering between his two sons, as if unable to decide who to defend. Amanda had jumped up, her eyes blazing at Kevin with undisguised hatred. But what hurt me most was Alex's look. My son. Those young eyes were now red with anger and hurt. Tears began rolling down his small cheeks, but the boy's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. As for me, time seemed to stretch in the moments after the fall. 35 years of patience, over 10 years of teaching and restraint. Everything was about to vanish in a rage I'd never let explode. In that moment, lying on the floor, a strange feeling surged through me. Not just humiliation, but the feeling of a betrayed child. I became 10-year-old Greg again, who always protected and loved his little brother, only to get mean pranks in return. All those years of growing up seemed to disappear, and we were just two little brothers competing for our parents' attention. My train of thought was cut off by Kevin's voice, this time carrying fake remorse. "Oh, big brother, I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd actually fall." But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something else, a glint of satisfaction, a strange joy at seeing me in this situation. Right then, a memory suddenly came back. 12-year-old Kevin had once deliberately spilled water on my graduation speech, then gave a similar apology with those same eyes. Nothing different, 23 years, and my brother still hadn't changed. I was about to say something when an angry shout cut through the room, and before anyone could react, Alex, my shy son, had lunged at Kevin with a fury I'd never seen in him. In the space, heavy as if pressed down by an invisible boulder, I heard my son scream, "Stop!" a sound that tore through the frozen atmosphere. And then, everything happened so fast I couldn't stop it. Just as he shouted, Alex jumped up from his chair with unexpected strength. His small face was bright red, his eyes teary but blazing with determination. He charged at Kevin like a small tornado, his tiny fists pounding at his uncle's waist and legs. "You're mean, mean, mean," Alex screamed, his voice breaking with emotion. Angry tears streamed down his young face, along with pure outrage at the injustice. Kevin stood frozen, completely caught off guard by his little nephew's reaction. He awkwardly raised his hands, trying to avoid the punches, stammering, "Hey, Superman, calm down. I was joking with your dad." Right as Kevin finished speaking, Alex looked up, his eyes blazing. "Not joking. You made my dad fall. You're the meanest person." His voice was high-pitched, echoing through the room, containing the kind of anger only a child could express, direct, unguarded, uncalculated. Struggling to stand up, I quickly approached, gently pulling Alex back. "Alex, that's enough, son. I'm okay." I tried to keep my voice calm, though my heart was racing, half from emotion at my son's love, half from worry about the situation spiraling out of control. Kevin, his face red with embarrassment and shame, suddenly went on the defensive. He looked at me accusingly. "Wow, you teach your son to attack people like that? Really educational." Right then, Amanda came beside me with tissues. Her eyes showed worry for me, pride in Alex's protective reaction, and anger at Kevin. She gently wiped my face, not saying a word, but her eyes conveying everything. Finally, Robert and Linda seemed to snap out of their frozen state. They stood up, looking shocked. My mom trembled as she brought her hand to her mouth, while my dad looked confused about whose side to take. I hugged Alex, feeling every slight tremor in my son. His heart was pounding, and I felt an overwhelming emotion. Pride in my child, who dared to protect his family. Kevin tried to save face, smirking slightly, really dramatic. "It was just a little joke, Greg. The boy needs to learn to take jokes." Still holding Alex in my arms, I looked straight into Kevin's eyes, my voice dropping to almost a whisper. A joke? You think humiliating me in front of my son is a joke? Is that how you define brotherhood? Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the following reaction. The atmosphere was tense like a guitar string about to snap. In that moment when the room froze as I faced Kevin, the words and emotions suppressed too long could no longer be held back. My little son still stood beside me, his shoulders shaking with outrage, becoming the spark that ignited the unavoidable confrontation. Seeing my look, Kevin smirked and said mockingly, "Oh wow, Saint Gregory the Perfect is starting to preach again. Your son needs to learn to take a joke." Just hearing those words, the blood in my veins seemed to boil. 30 years of restraint had now burst. Don't dare tell me how to raise my son. You have no right. Kevin flinched at my reaction, but then quickly regained his counterattack. He stepped closer, years of accumulated anger erupting. Do you know what it feels like to live in your shadow? In that moment, I could almost see the wounded child in Kevin, the boy constantly trying to get attention. But that understanding was quickly overwhelmed by anger. I stepped close to Kevin's face, my voice dropping dangerously low. "And this is how you deal with it? By humiliating me in front of the whole family?" Kevin screamed back, his face bright red. "At least I live true to myself, not like you, boring, fake with your pathetic salary job, model wife and kids, and dull life." I felt Amanda's hand on my shoulder, trying to pull me back. Behind Kevin, Robert, and Linda finally reacted. My mom stepped forward, tears rolling down her wrinkled face. "Boys, please stop. Today is Thanksgiving." But nothing seemed able to stop the flood of emotions surging. I no longer recognized myself as heartfelt words poured out. "You've always been jealous of what I have, but you don't understand that I was jealous of you too, every day of my life." As soon as I said this, the room fell into absolute silence. Kevin stared at me in shock, his expression changing from anger to doubt. "Me? You're jealous of me? Don't be ridiculous." Then, a thin layer seemed to be removed from my soul. My voice softened, almost calm as I confessed. "You had freedom, Kevin. No constraints, no one placing expectations on you. I always had to be perfect. I wasn't allowed to fail, wasn't allowed to disappoint people. Do you know how heavy that pressure was?" I saw Kevin as if struck. He opened his mouth, anger gradually subsiding, replaced by amazement. But then the proud facade quickly returned. Kevin laughed bitterly. "So now we're pitying each other? How touching. But don't expect me to believe this act." Looking into Kevin's eyes for a moment, I knew the conversation had reached its end. There was nothing more to say, no way to heal, at least not tonight. I turned to my wife and son. "Amanda, Alex, we're leaving." Right then, Robert stood up abruptly, his broad shoulders tense, his eyes cold and sharp. His voice was low, controlled, but full of authority. "Gregory, stop." It wasn't a plea, but a command from the family patriarch. He clenched both hands into fists, then opened them, as if trying to contain his anger. "No one leaves this table. We'll solve this right now, as a family." I looked at the man who'd raised me my whole life, my heart aching seeing the suppressed fire in his eyes. But tonight, I needed to protect my dignity and the respect I deserved. Shaking my head slightly, I replied, "Dad, I'm sorry. I can't sit at a table with someone who doesn't respect me. Not tonight." Amanda took my hand, her eyes conveying the message that she supported my decision. Alex stood near his mom, still trembling slightly, but in those young eyes I saw a maturity beyond his years. The boy had stood up to protect what he believed was right. As I took Amanda and Alex's hands and headed for the door, I didn't expect my son to have one final bomb left to throw. A small but powerful act that would shake our entire family relationship. After a few seconds of looking back at the uncle he once admired, Alex gently pulled his hand from his mom's grip and returned to the dining room. There seemed to be a strange determination in every small step my son took as he approached the table. His shoulders were straighter, his walk more confident, as if he'd found a new source of strength. I wanted to call him back, but something about Alex's demeanor made me stand still, waiting. Standing in front of the dining table, My son reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the AirPods Pro box Kevin had given him. A gift that, just hours ago, had made him so excited. Alex stared at the gift for a long moment, his young eyes containing deep inner struggle. Then, as if he'd reached a final decision, he stepped in front of Kevin. With a slow but decisive motion, Alex placed the box down in front of his uncle. The entire room seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Kevin's expression changed from surprise to confusion. Right then, Alex looked straight into Kevin's eyes and said with a clear, pure voice, "I don't need this anymore. You don't love my dad, so I don't love you anymore either." In that moment, I felt a tremor run through my entire body, not because of my son's words, but because of the simple truth in them. No adult complexity, no tactics, no calculations, just naked truth from a child's heart. The room fell into absolute silence. Linda cried soundlessly, her shoulders shaking. Even Kevin wasn't smiling anymore, his face frozen in an unreadable expression, a mix of shock, shame, and perhaps a hint of regret. Everyone was waiting for Kevin to react. He looked down at the box on the table, his finger tapping lightly on the table edge, clearly trying to find a way to save face. Finally, Kevin broke the silence with a forced smile. "Fine. I'll save it for a nephew who knows how to take jokes." Right after saying that, Kevin picked up the chair I'd been sitting on, placing it back in position with a defiant look. He looked around the dining table, his eyes stopping at each face, then said dismissively, "Looks like our family has room again." I stopped, turned back, not believing my ears. After everything that had happened, Kevin still wouldn't stop, continuing to play psychological games around that chair? A slight movement from the head of the table caught my attention. Robert slowly stood up. He'd placed his napkin down and put both hands on the table, his fingers gripping the hard oak wood. I'd never seen my dad like this. A transformation was happening in him. His usually gentle eyes now blazed with a fire I'd never seen, his jaw clenched tight under his silver beard. Linda quickly placed her hand on her husband's arm, looking worried, as if she knew exactly what was about to happen. Everyone in the room was tensely waiting, the atmosphere so heavy you could feel it. But before I could realize what was happening, my dad had moved faster than I'd ever seen a 68-year-old man move. In a moment, as if time had slowed down, my dad walked straight toward Kevin, his dark blue eyes never leaving his younger son for even a second. When Kevin smirked triumphantly and prepared to sit in my chair, my dad was right beside him. Suddenly and decisively, he kicked the chair hard. The kick from the man who'd been a military veteran sent the chair flying almost 3 feet away. Kevin, in the middle of sitting down, completely lost his balance. He fell backward onto the floor with a heavy thud, his hands flailing in the air as if trying to grab onto something. Shocked gasps rang out throughout the dining room. The relatives froze in their seats, no one daring to move. I felt Amanda's hand grip my arm tightly, while Alex stood close by, eyes wide with amazement. In the tense atmosphere, my dad bent down to look at Kevin, lying sprawled out, his eyes showing no anger, only determination and deep disappointment. With a voice low enough to almost be a whisper but clear enough for everyone to hear, he slowly said, "You don't deserve to sit at this table either, Kevin." Simple words, but their weight seemed to press down on the entire room. A drop of sweat rolled down Kevin's temple as he slowly stood up. For the first time in his life, I saw my brother completely lose his usual confidence. Kevin's face was bright red, but not from anger. It was from confusion, shame, and, perhaps, for the first time, from awareness of consequences. After a long breath, my dad turned back to me, his voice considerably softer. "Gregory, come back here. Your mom and I have something to say to both of you." I hesitantly looked at Amanda. She nodded slightly, her eyes clearly conveying, "I think we should listen to him." We returned to the dining table, Alex still holding my hand tightly, as if afraid I'd disappear if he let go. As soon as I approached, Robert placed his weathered hands on my shoulders, looking straight into my eyes with a look I'd never seen, a new respect, as if he was seeing me not as his son, but as an equal man. With a slow and sure voice, my dad began, "Originally, I planned to split this house between both of you when your mom and I are gone. This is family property, where we've shared so many memories. But after what happened today... He paused, took a deep breath, then continued, each word carefully considered. This house will belong to Gregory and his family. The person who knows how to appreciate its true value, not material things, but the memories, love, and respect it represents. Kevin's mouth dropped open, as if he couldn't believe his ears. So did I, feeling stunned, mixed with another complex emotion I couldn't name. It wasn't entirely joy, but a heavy acceptance that our family relationship had reached a point beyond repair. My dad turned to Kevin, his tone serious but not angry. Kevin, you're talented and smart, but you're gambling your entire future on fleeting things. Money, status, things that can be lost overnight. If you lost everything tomorrow, what would you have left? No family, no respect, no people who truly care about you. I watched Kevin while Dad spoke. For the first time since we'd grown up, he had no sharp comeback. My brother's face was bright red, not from his usual anger but from genuine shame. My dad's voice softened as he continued. However, I'm not closing this door completely. When you truly grow up, when you can admit your mistakes and learn to respect others, I'll reconsider. Because above all, we're still family. Throughout Dad's speech, my mom stood beside him, her eyes teary but shining with agreement. She looked at her husband with new love and admiration, as if seeing again the man she'd loved long ago. Kevin said nothing. After a few minutes, he had nothing left to say. No more taunting, no more sarcasm, no more excuses. He quietly left the dining table, strolled to the living room, and stopped in front of an old family photo hanging on the wall. In that moment, Kevin stood silently in front of the photo for a long time, where the two of us were still smiling brightly together, and I wondered whether this was the end of a relationship or a chance to start over. After the Thanksgiving incident, it seemed everyone needed time to process what had happened. Silence enveloped our family like early winter snow, giving each person their own lesson. In the following weeks, my mom called almost every day, her voice trembling with worry. Son, Kevin won't answer my calls. He hasn't come home since that day. I'm scared he'll do something foolish. Every time I heard these words, my chest tightened. Despite still being angry at Kevin, worry for my brother's safety quietly gnawed at me every night. I couldn't stop thinking about Kevin's stunned face in front of that old family photo, the last image I saw before we left. My dad, like many men of his generation, hardly mentioned the incident during our calls. But Mom whispered to me that he'd met with a lawyer to change his will officially. Your dad's very determined, she said, but I see his eyes get red every time he looks at Kevin's old room. In late nights, when the house fell into silence, I often found myself staring at my phone, my finger scrolling to Kevin's name in contacts, then stopping. Perhaps that's family love, making us ache endlessly. Alex, usually so energetic, had become surprisingly quiet since that day. One evening, while I was reading him a story, the boy suddenly looked up and asked, Dad, will Uncle Kevin hate us forever? I didn't know how to answer. Finally, I just hugged him and whispered, sometimes adults need time to realize their mistakes, son. Like when you were mad at Mark at school, remember? But in the end, you were still friends. Amanda always supported me, but I knew she was worried too. One evening, as we sat on the porch looking at the garden covered with autumn leaves, my wife sighed softly. I understand the tension between you and Kevin, but family is still family, Greg. Maybe someday. Christmas was approaching, the festive atmosphere beginning to fill everywhere, but in my heart was only one question. Would Kevin show up? Mom had prepared enough seats for the whole family, including Kevin, like a silent hope. Through a mutual friend, I learned that Kevin was having work troubles. A big deal had fallen through, costing him a significant amount of money. Hearing this news, I felt a complex emotion, both sympathy for my brother and the thought that this might be a necessary lesson. During those cold final days of the year, I often stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered street, wondering what our lives would be like when spring came. Could family wounds heal, or had they become too deep? And then, on a pouring rain night 2 months after the incident, when I'd almost accepted that our brotherhood might be permanently over, my phone rang, displaying a name I didn't think I'd see again. Kevin. After my wife's supportive nod, after a few seconds of hesitation that felt like a lifetime, I answered. In that call, for the first time in 30 years, my brother truly spoke a sincere apology. The truth is, Kevin admitted, his voice trembling, every time I sold a house, I'd buy something expensive to show off to you. I kept thinking that if I had luxury things, people would value me. But now I understand it was all just an empty facade. In that moment, I realized my brother was ready to let go of the mask he'd worn for so many years. Instead of meeting at a coffee shop as initially planned, I suggested meeting at our parents' house, where we were born and raised, and where we needed to start over. 2 weeks later, on a sunny Sunday, my Camry was parked in front of my parents' yard. Amanda squeezed my hand gently before getting out. "Everything will be okay," she said. While Alex excitedly ran toward the porch, I saw an old Honda Civic parked at the corner, not the Porsche Kevin usually drove. My brother stepped out of the car, wearing a simple shirt instead of an expensive suit. We stood facing each other for a long time, neither saying anything. Finally, Kevin extended his hand. "Thanks for giving me this chance, big brother." In my brother's eyes, I saw something that had been absent for many years: sincerity. When the door opened, my mom burst into tears. She hugged both her sons tightly, her trembling fingers touching our faces as if confirming this wasn't a dream. Dad stood behind Mom, his face calm but his eyes red. He nodded slightly at Kevin, a simple gesture but heavy with meaning, as if saying, "I'm proud of you." At lunch, Kevin did something I'd never seen. He cooked the apple-glazed ribs himself, the whole family's favorite dish. He fumbled in the kitchen, spilling spices a few times, but no one laughed. Mom stood beside him, patiently guiding, while Dad told old stories about his two mischievous sons. After the meal, Kevin spent private time with Alex in the backyard, where the old swing was. Through the window, I saw my brother Neil, looking straight into my son's eyes. I couldn't hear what they said, but when they came back in, Alex was sitting on his uncle's shoulders, a bright smile on his face. "Dad, Uncle Kevin promised to teach me fishing this summer," Alex excitedly announced. In the following months, Kevin gradually changed. Not overnight, but step by step. He sold the Porsche and moved to a smaller apartment. Every Sunday, Kevin showed up for family dinner, bringing stories about his new job at the courthouse. A small position, but one he talked about with genuine pride. That summer, Kevin kept his promise and took Alex fishing. I'll never forget the moment my son excitedly showed off his first fish, and I realized sometimes children can teach us the most profound lessons about forgiveness. What surprised me most was when Kevin introduced the family to his new girlfriend, an elementary school teacher named Anna. She was gentle, intelligent, and utterly uninterested in superficial things. Watching how my brother looked at her, I knew Kevin had found real love. That evening, as we sat drinking coffee on the porch, Kevin whispered, I realized I'd spent my whole life chasing things that didn't matter. And now, when I don't have those things anymore, I feel happier than ever." That night, looking up at the starry sky, I realized that sometimes a storm has to pass before we can see the beauty of a clear blue sky, just as in the relationship between Kevin and me. Another Thanksgiving is coming. Through this story, I want to share that sometimes we need to lose something to realize its actual value. That's precisely the meaning of Thanksgiving: being grateful for what we have, the loved ones still by our side, and the opportunity to heal broken relationships. And that's where my story ends. Thank you for listening to my story. Wherever you are, I hope you find peaceful moments with loved ones during this holiday season. My dad used a baseball bat to destroy my $265,000 Lamborghini Huracan. The sound of the shattering windshield, the metal crashing against the metal, the sight of my beloved car getting deformed, it's all still crystal clear in my memory. Why did he do it? Did I challenge him? And did I stand up to protect what was rightfully mine? Let's dive into this story. Before I delve into the details, I would like to express my sincere gratitude from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas, 32 years old. I'm the founder of Nexera Tech, a tech company valued at $14 million in San Jose. The story I'm sharing with you today occurred in June 2024, and to this day, I still vividly recall what happened. Every time I close my eyes, I can still hear the metal hitting glass, Dad screaming, and Mom's heartbroken sobs on what should have been her joyful birthday. It was a Thursday afternoon. I came home to attend Mom's birthday party after she invited me. Mom was turning 60, and this birthday was a memorable milestone in her life. That's why she invited nearly 40 guests to the party, including relatives living near Fresno, some close friends, and longtime neighbors of my parents. Around 3 p.m., I drove the Lamborghini Huracan I'd bought 2 months earlier from San Jose to Fresno for Mom's birthday party. My company had just completed a major deal with a Silicon Valley partner, and I decided to reward myself with this car as a memorable milestone after 6 years of building my company. While driving the Lamborghini home, I had no idea that the car I was sitting in would become the main reason my family would turn against each other. I also couldn't imagine that in just a few hours, I'd have to witness my own dad grabbing a baseball bat and smashing the car I'd worked 6 years to afford. Around 5 p.m., I arrived at my parents' house in Fresno, where I grew up and had the most beautiful childhood years. As soon as I stopped the car in front of the yard, the distinctive engine sound of the Lamborghini caught everyone's attention. A few relatives came out to the porch out of curiosity, and I could see them pointing at the car. When I opened the door and stepped out, Aunt Betty was the first to exclaim in amazement. "Oh my God, Lucas, did you buy a Lamborghini?" Uncle Frank, standing next to her, couldn't hide his shock either. He looked at the car and asked me, "Lucas, is your work going that well? This car must cost several $100,000, right?" After their amazed compliments, I just smiled, nodded, and greeted them. After getting out of the car, I quickly grabbed the bouquet from the passenger seat along with the gift box I'd prepared for Mom on this special birthday. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, a few other relatives surrounded me, asking about the car with all kinds of questions, from price to top speed. I politely responded with a few brief answers, then hurried to find Mom. I didn't want the car to become the center of attention at the party, because today was Mom's day, not my day to show off my car. Mom was standing in the living room at that time. She turned around when she heard my footsteps. The moment she saw me, Mom's face lit up with joy. She quickly walked toward me. When I handed Mom the bouquet and gift box, she was so moved she couldn't speak. Mom hugged me tight, and I heard her voice choked with emotion whispering in my ear, "You're home. I'm so happy. Thank you." Seeing Mom's joy, I felt a warm sense of knowing I'd made her happy. No matter how busy work got, I never missed essential occasions like this. However, in that cheerful atmosphere, I noticed 2 people who didn't seem happy to see me at all. That was Dad and Liam, my younger brother. Dad stood in the corner of the living room, holding a glass of wine, his eyes looking at me with a cold, hard-to-understand expression. Liam stood next to the food table, head down, not bothering to look at me even once. At that moment, I knew why they weren't happy. This wasn't the first time I'd felt jealousy from my brother, and it wasn't the first time Dad showed displeasure with what I'd achieved. After Mom left to continue greeting guests, Dad approached me immediately. He put his wine glass down on the table, his sharp, cold eyes looking straight into mine, then asked with an accusatory tone, "Did you just buy that car?" I tried to keep my voice calm when I answered Dad. "Yes, Dad. I bought it 2 months ago." Dad continued with a sarcastic tone. "Must be expensive, huh?" I hesitated for a second, then answered honestly, "Close to $300,000. Hearing that number, Dad's face suddenly changed. He stepped closer to me, his voice almost shouting, "Are you insane? $300,000 for a car? With that money, you could have helped your brother open the coffee shop he's been dreaming of." Hearing Dad's words, a familiar, uncomfortable feeling rose in my chest. Once again, he brought up Liam. Once again, he wanted me to sacrifice for my brother. My dad is a retired accountant. He's always managed the family finances. He's a practical person with old-school thinking, and for him, family means helping one another. There's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is that helping in Dad's eyes always means I have to give, while Liam receives. Standing in front of Dad at Mom's birthday party, I wanted to argue with him about how he constantly brought up my having to help Liam. But after a few seconds of thinking, I chose to respond gently because I didn't want to fight on Mom's happy day. I looked straight into Dad's eyes, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible, and said, It's just a little reward I gave myself after 6 years of hard work. Dad. Even though I tried to be gentle, Dad still wouldn't let it go. He took another step toward me, his voice harsher when he said, "A reward should just be something worth a few $1,000s. You're wasting money while your brother is still earning every penny to pay rent." Dad had just finished speaking when Liam appeared behind me. He jumped into the conversation with a bitter voice. "Lucas, Dad's right. You're so selfish. If you'd help me, maybe my life would be different by now." After those ridiculous words from Dad and Liam, I stayed silent and went to find a quiet corner to sit. I didn't want to argue with people who only knew how to blame circumstances and demand others sacrifice for them. Around 6 p.m., Mom's birthday party began with the usual ceremonies. Everyone sang happy birthday together. Then Mom blew out the candles and cut the cake. Mom's face was glowing with happiness, and I felt relieved seeing her so joyful. After a few traditional ceremonies, Mom stood up to give a speech in front of all the guests. She thanked everyone for coming and, in particular, expressed her happiness at having me there on this special day. Mom's voice was full of pride when she mentioned my name, and I could feel the love she had for me through every word. In Mom's eyes, I was her pride and joy. Between Liam and me, Mom didn't favor anyone. She loved both her children equally. But whenever someone asked about me, Mom would tell them with such a proud voice. She'd talk about my company, about the achievements I'd made with eyes full of joy. I was thrilled that I'd become Mom's pride. During the first hour of the party, everything went smoothly. I sat near my parents' longtime neighbors and a few relatives. We chatted about work, about life, about enjoyable experiences. But that peace didn't last long. About an hour into the party, Liam appeared next to me. He was holding a half-finished glass of wine, his eyes a bit glazed from the alcohol. He raised his glass toward me and offered a toast. After that reluctant toast, Liam looked at me with a forced smile and suggested in a voice like he was trying to sound friendly, "Lucas, congrats on the new car. Can I borrow it to take a spin around the neighborhood?" I'm not a selfish or petty person. If Liam had asked to borrow the car under different circumstances, maybe I would have agreed. But Liam was almost drunk after drinking a lot of wine, and I couldn't hand over a supercar to someone in that condition. After a few seconds of thinking, I tried to refuse as gently as possible. I told him, "Maybe another time, Liam. You're drunk today, driving would be dangerous. This car is also tough to handle. You need to be sober to control it." Hearing my refusal, Liam didn't say anything. He just smiled sarcastically, his eyes flashing with poorly hidden anger. Then he dropped a cold line before turning away. "Don't make excuses. You're just selfish." After that comment, Liam walked away. I watched him go, feeling a sense of tiredness inside. I thought that after I refused, Liam would understand and leave me alone. But I was wrong. My rejection plus the alcohol in his system made him lose control. And just minutes later, he would ruin Mom's birthday party. About 15 minutes after the first refusal, Liam came back. This time, he didn't come alone but dragged Dad along. Liam stood in front of me, his voice louder than before, loud enough for people around to hear. He said to me, "Lucas, I'm asking one more time. May I borrow the car for one lap? Just one lap." At this point, I stood up, trying to remain calm as I looked at my brother. I slowly said to him, "Liam, I already told you. You're drunk. I can't let you borrow the car in this condition." After my words, Dad started jumping in. His eyes looked at me with displeasure. He spoke up with a critical voice. "Lucas, it's just a car. Don't be dramatic. What's wrong with Liam borrowing it for a bit?" Hearing Dad's words, I turned to look at him, trying to explain. "Dad, Liam is drunk. That car isn't a regular car. It's very powerful and hard to control. If Liam drives in this condition, he could cause an accident and kill someone." Despite my warnings, Dad raised his voice. "You always have excuses. Liam is your brother. He wants to try the car for a bit, so let him try. This is family, not your company, where you give orders." Our argument began to attract everyone's attention at the party. A few relatives, who had long been jealous of my success, began speaking up to support Dad and Liam. Aunt Martha, Dad's sister, said with a sarcastic tone, "Lucas, now that you're successful, you should share with family. You're too selfish." Uncle Harold also said with an annoyed expression, "That's right. Just letting him borrow the car for a bit. And you won't even do that. Now that Lucas has money, he looks down on the whole family." Their words made me feel more sad than angry at that moment. But not everyone thought that way. Mr. Peterson, my parents' longtime neighbor, stood up to defend me. He told everyone, "Wait a minute, I think Lucas has a point. Liam has been drinking a lot. Letting him drive in this condition is very dangerous. This is a safety issue, not selfishness." Mrs. Thompson also nodded in agreement and added, "Exactly. Lamborghinis are potent cars. Not everyone can drive them. Letting a drunk person drive is asking for death." The neighbor's words made me feel encouraged again. At least someone was defending me at the party. The party atmosphere completely changed at that point. There was no longer the cheerful mood of a birthday party, but instead arguments back and forth between the two sides. The conversations got louder, harsher, and I could see tense faces all around. In the middle of the heated atmosphere, Mom's scream rang out from the living room doorway. She stepped into the crowd, her face red with anger and embarrassment. Mom looked at Dad, then at Liam, then at me, her voice shaking as she tried to control her emotions. "Enough. Today is my birthday. What are you all doing?" Immediately, Dad looked at Mom and roared, "Can't you see? Lucas is being selfish. It's just a car. What's wrong with Liam borrowing it for a bit?" Hearing Dad's words, Mom replied, "George, that car is Lucas's property. Lucas has the right to lend it or not lend it. You're favoring Liam." Mom's words were like adding fuel to the fire. Dad got so angry that he threw the wine glass in his hand onto the floor. The sound of breaking glass rang out, making the whole room go silent. Right after that, he quickly stepped toward my mom with a scary expression. Seeing Dad's anger and actions, I also stood up and quickly moved toward Mom. Just when Dad was only 2 steps away from Mom, I stepped in and stood in front of her. I didn't know what Dad was planning to do, but I wouldn't let anyone hurt Mom. Seeing me standing guard, Dad pushed me with his hand, but I didn't budge. I stood firm like a wall, not taking my eyes off Dad. Dad yelled at Mom, his voice like it wanted to tear through the air. "Brenda, I'm telling you, you're the one who's favoring. You always defend Lucas and look down on Liam." My mom wasn't backing down either. She pushed me aside with her hand, then stood face to face with Dad. Her face was full of anger. Mom said to Dad through gritted teeth, "George, you're always Liam, Liam, and Liam. You're the one who's favoring. Have you ever seen what Lucas has done to achieve his current success? Have you ever been proud of him?" My dad also gritted his teeth and replied, "I'm divorcing you." After that statement, the entire room fell silent. No one dared breathe loudly. The guests stood there like statues, not knowing what to do. After Dad's threatening words, Mom showed no fear at all. She burst out laughing, a bitter and painful laugh. She looked straight into Dad's eyes and said with a sarcastic voice, "Do it right now. I'm tired of you too. Today is my birthday, you're my husband, but you're the one ruining it." After those words, Mom turned her back and left the living room. I watched Mom's figure, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed when I saw her raise her hand to wipe away tears. Seeing Mom like that, I felt a bit of regret for driving the Lamborghini to the party. If I hadn't brought it, maybe none of this would have happened. After Mom left, the party atmosphere became more chaotic than ever. Dad and Liam stood in the middle of the living room, continuing to blame me for ruining the party. Dad pointed his finger at my face, his voice full of resentment. "Do you see? What have you done? You've ruined your mother's birthday." Liam also jumped in with a gleeful expression. He said to me, "That's right. It's all your fault. If you weren't so selfish, none of this would have happened." Mr. Peterson, who had defended me earlier, spoke up to argue. "Wait a minute. I think everyone needs to calm down. Lucas didn't do anything wrong. He just refused to let a drunk person borrow his car. That was the right decision." Hearing Mr. Peterson speak, Dad turned to look at him with hostile eyes. Dad gritted his teeth and declared, "Mr. Peterson, from today, you're no longer my neighbor. I'm cutting ties with you." Mrs. Thompson also wouldn't stay silent. She said with a calm but firm voice, "George, you're acting unreasonably. This is a safety issue, not a family emotional matter." Seeing the neighbors side with me, Dad roared like a cornered animal. "All of you are taking his side? Fine. I'll show you all the consequences of spoiling a selfish child. When I thought everything would stop at arguing, Dad's following action shocked me. He quickly walked to the back of the house, toward the storage shed. I didn't understand what he was planning to do, but an uneasy feeling rose in my chest. About a minute later, Dad came back, and in his hand was a metal baseball bat. Everyone was bewildered by that action. Dad didn't say anything. He just walked past us and headed straight to the yard with the bat in his hand. His eyes at that moment were like those of someone who had lost all reason. When he got close to my Lamborghini, Dad swung the bat up and hit the windshield hard. The sound of breaking glass rang out in the night, sharp and painful like the sound of my heart shattering. I almost screamed from the porch, "Stop! You can't smash my car." After that scream, I dashed to the car. Liam and a few relatives also ran after, but not to stop him, but to watch. Some people started pulling out their phones and recording everything. When I got to the car, Dad had already swung the bat 5 times in a row at my vehicle. The windshield was completely shattered. The hood was deformed with deep dents. The left headlight was broken, and the car's paint was scratched all over like open wounds. Not stopping there, Dad continued smashing my car. While hitting it, he screamed with an almost insane voice, "This is punishment for you. You think you're so great? You think you're better than me?" On the outside, Liam stood cheering Dad on with a gleeful expression. He yelled, "That's right, Dad. Hit it harder. Lucas needs to learn a lesson from this." At that moment, I could only stand there holding my head, watching the car get destroyed. Every sound of the bat hitting metal was like a knife cutting into my heart. It wasn't just a car. It was 6 years of nonstop work, sleepless nights spent writing code, and times when I almost went bankrupt, but I still gritted my teeth and got back up. A few seconds after Dad's car smashing, Mom's scream rang out from the house door, "George, you're crazy. Stop right now." But no matter who spoke up, my dad still couldn't hear. He seemed to have sunk into an uncontrollable madness, continuously swinging the bat at my car. In the midst of that chaotic scene, I suddenly found myself calm. I took out my phone and called 911. My voice was shaking, but I tried to be clear when talking to the operator. "I need to report property destruction. My dad is using a baseball bat to smash my car." After those words, I gave the 911 operator my parents' house address. The operator stated that police patrolling the area would arrive immediately. After I hung up, Mom also came out. She stood next to me, gently gripping my arm. I could feel she was shaking, but she wasn't crying. Mom just stood there, silently watching her husband frantically destroying her son's property. About 10 minutes later, Dad was also tired. He was panting and threw the baseball bat to one side. The Lamborghini was now just a pile of twisted metal, no longer recognizable in its original form. Dad walked over to stand face to face with me, his eyes still full of hatred. He coldly said to me, "This is punishment for someone selfish with family." After those words, he looked at me, then looked at Mom with ice-cold eyes, and went into the house. After Dad left, Mom turned to me, her voice choked. "Lucas, I'm sorry. If I hadn't thrown the party, your car wouldn't have been destroyed." Hearing Mom's words, I gently put my arm around Mom's shoulder to comfort her, then replied in the calmest voice possible, "You're not at fault. I need you not to interfere when the police arrive." Hearing me say that, Mom nodded and answered with a firm voice, "I promise. I won't interfere." In my heart at that moment, I was determined to get back what belonged to me. Dad had destroyed my property, and he would have to take responsibility for his actions. About 5 minutes after Dad went into the house, a police car stopped in front of my parents' house. 2 officers got out, one male and one female, both looking serious when they saw the destroyed car. The male officer walked up to me and asked in a professional voice, "Are you the one who called to report this?" I nodded and started giving my statement. I told them everything in detail, from Liam's request to borrow the car to the argument and finally Dad's actions. The witnesses, including Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Thompson, as well as several others, also provided their statements one by one. They confirmed what I said was true, and added that my dad had acted in an uncontrolled fit of rage. The female officer wrote everything down, then went into the house to talk to my dad. About 10 minutes later, she came back out with Dad. He walked behind her with his face still full of anger. When the male officer asked Dad about what happened, Dad replied with a challenging voice, "I have the right to smash his car. This is my house and I was disciplining my son. Police have no right to interfere in family matters." Hearing what my dad said, the male officer looked at Dad, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, that car is your son's property, not yours. You're destroying it, which is property destruction. This is a criminal offense under California law. You have the right to remain silent, but anything you say can be used as evidence against you in court." My dad still wouldn't understand. He continued arguing loudly. "He's my son. I raised him. I have the right to do whatever I want." The female officer shook her head and said to her colleague, "Cuff him." My dad was then handcuffed and led toward the police car. When he walked past me, he looked at me with hateful eyes and gritted his teeth. "Well done. Calling the police to arrest your own father. Ungrateful brat." I replied in a calm voice, without a trace of trembling, "Don't worry, Dad. You'll have to pay me for a new car, and also the money I lent you in 2022 to pay off your gambling debts." Hearing me mention that debt, Dad suddenly stopped. His face went pale, and he screamed in panic, "You promised to keep that secret." Seeing Dad's fear, I smiled coldly and replied, "That's right, I promised. But you smashed my car. You even called me ungrateful. I don't need to keep secrets anymore." After that, the police put Dad in the car and drove away. I stood watching the police car disappear into the night, feeling no regret in my heart. After Dad was taken away, Mom walked over to me. She looked at me with eyes both painful and curious, then asked, "Lucas, what's this money you lent your dad about? I've never heard about this." I took a deep breath, then told Mom the whole truth. In August 2022, Dad had secretly gone to the casino behind Mom's back and lost a substantial amount. He borrowed nearly $100,000 from outside sources, and when he was unable to repay it, he called me for help. At that time, I lent my dad the money, and he signed a loan agreement. Dad was scared Mom would divorce him if she found out, so he begged me to keep it secret, and I agreed. After hearing my story, Mom was silent for a long time. Then she glared at me with knife-sharp eyes and said with a reproachful voice, "You're something else. Hiding this from me, too." I knew Mom was angry, so I could only hug her shoulder and comfort her. "I'm sorry, Mom." After my apology, Mom sighed. She didn't say anything more, just turned away to look into space. The party then ended in a heavy atmosphere. The guests left one by one, each carrying a different expression. Some were worried, some were curious, and some whispered and gossiped among themselves. When Liam walked past me, I suddenly spoke up, making him stop. "Liam, do you still remember the $80,000 I lent you for college?" Liam froze. His face went pale. He turned to look at me with a scared expression, then stuttered, Didn't you give me that money?" I looked straight into his eyes and replied with an ice-cold voice, "The loan papers are still at my house. I only give to people who deserve it, not to ungrateful jerks." At this point, Liam completely changed his attitude. He quickly stepped in front of me, his voice pleading, "Lucas, don't do this. We're family. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I coldly replied without any hesitation. Too late. After those words, I turned my back and walked to the yard, leaving Liam kneeling on the ground. He wasn't kneeling to beg for my forgiveness. He was kneeling because he didn't know where he'd find $80,000 to pay me back. One day after being arrested, Dad was bailed out by his younger brother, Uncle Raymond. After that, Dad called me many times, but I didn't answer. He even came all the way to my house in San Jose, but I avoided him every time. I was too tired and didn't want to hear any apologies or pleas from him. I knew Dad didn't come because he truly regretted what he did. He came because he was scared of facing the legal consequences of his actions. He came because he wanted me to drop the lawsuit, not because he cared about me. In the following days, I hired Ryan, a well-known lawyer in Fresno, to help me recover the $100,000 I'd lent Dad and the $80,000 I'd lent Liam for college. Some relatives later spoke up to offer me advice. Aunt Martha called with a reproachful voice, "Lucas, family should resolve things internally. Taking your dad to court disgraces the whole family." Uncle Harold also called with similar words, "You should think again. Your dad is your dad. Even if he was wrong, you shouldn't sue him." But I was determined to clarify everything. I was no longer the obedient child who endured all injustice just because of the word family. Despite their advice, I blocked all the phone numbers of those who defended Dad and Liam. During the days leading up to the trial, I often called my mom. She was still living in that house with Dad, but according to what Mom told me, they barely spoke to each other. Each person lived in their own world, under the same roof. 2 months after Dad smashed my Lamborghini Huracan, the trial took place at the county court. That day, I sat in the plaintiff's section with lawyer Ryan beside me. Across from us, Dad sat with his lawyer, a middle-aged man with a tense expression. Mom sat in the back row, not taking anyone's side. The trial lasted about 2 hours. The prosecution presented evidence, including videos recorded by party guests, witness statements, and damage assessment reports from the car dealership. Ryan also explained the loan documents that Dad and Liam had signed, proving they owed me a total of $180,000. Dad's lawyer tried to argue that Dad acted in a momentary loss of control and had no intention to cause harm. But the judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, didn't accept that argument. She looked at Dad and said sternly, "You had enough time to calm down. You went into the storage shed, got a baseball bat, and came back out to smash the car. This wasn't a momentary action. This was intentional behavior." The judge's words left my dad's lawyer and my dad speechless. After 2 tense hours, the judge delivered her verdict. She ordered Dad to pay $265,000 in damages, exactly the value of the car as determined by the dealership's appraisal. At the same time, the $100,000 Dad had borrowed from me also had to be repaid with interest. Additionally, he had to pay court costs and lawyer fees. He would also be on probation for 5 years. As for Liam, the judge also ordered him to repay the full $80,000, including interest at the bank's rates. Hearing the verdict, Dad stood up, his voice shaking as he told the judge, "Your Honor, I don't have money to pay. I'm a retiree. My only income is my pension." But the judge showed no sympathy. She looked at Dad and declared coldly, "You have assets. Sell your assets to pay. You have 60 days. Remember that." After the judge ended the session, I stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Mom walked beside me. She didn't say anything during the entire walk from the courtroom to the parking lot. When we stood next to my car, I turned to ask Mom, "Are you sad that I sued Dad in court?" Mom looked at me, her eyes both sad and calm. She replied with a gentle but firm voice, "A little sad. However, the truth is always the truth, and justice must take precedence. I don't blame you." Hearing Mom say that, I felt a sense of relief. I hugged Mom and said, "Thank you, Mom." After that trial ended, I returned to San Jose to continue my life. I thought everything was over, at least legally, but I didn't expect what Mom did next would shock me. Exactly 2 months after the trial, I received all the compensation money for the car, as well as the cash Dad and Liam had borrowed, along with interest. Nearly $500,000 was transferred to my account. When I saw that money in my account, I didn't feel happy. I only felt a strange emptiness. That money couldn't make up for what was lost, not the car, but the family relationship that was shattered beyond repair. I wondered how they managed to get that much money to pay. Dad was just a retired accountant, and Liam worked as a sales clerk with a normal salary. There was no way they could have nearly $500,000 in 2 months. The answer came on a Saturday afternoon when I heard the doorbell. After a few rings, I opened the door and stood frozen when I saw who was standing in front of me. It was Mom. She had 4 suitcases with her, and her hair was a bit messy, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. Mom smiled and asked me with a voice both playful and a bit confused, "Lucas, can you rent me a bedroom in your house?" Seeing Mom at that moment, I was both shocked and delighted. I pulled Mom inside, helped her carry the suitcases in, and we sat down to talk. Mom told me everything. After the trial, she and Dad got divorced. Their assets were split in half according to the divorce settlement. Dad had to sell the house in Fresno to pay me compensation, and kept part of the proceeds to live on. Mom received her share of the money and decided to move to San Jose to be near me. That afternoon, I helped Mom move her things into the remaining bedroom in my house. The room wasn't huge, but it was comfortable enough for one person to stay in. 1 year has passed since Mom's fateful birthday party. My current life is relatively peaceful. Mom lives with me in the house in San Jose, and her presence makes the house so much warmer. Every morning, I wake up to the smell of Mom's coffee and the sound of her humming softly in the kitchen. Every evening, we sit down to dinner together and share what happened during the day. I no longer keep in touch with Dad and Liam. After the trial, they stopped trying to contact me. Sometimes I wonder if Dad and Liam regret what they did. But then I push those thoughts away. Whether they regret it or not doesn't matter to me anymore. Mom often reminds me about starting a family. Whenever she gets the chance, she says with a hopeful voice, "Lucas, you're already 32. When are you going to get married and have kids? I want to hold my grandchild before I get too old." Every time I hear Mom say that, I smile and change the subject. I know what Mom wants, but I'm not ready yet. After everything that happened, I need time to heal and regain my faith in life. Reflecting on this journey, I've learned 3 important lessons that I'd like to share with you. The first lesson: love doesn't mean you have to endure injustice. True love must be built on mutual respect and understanding. If one side always has to sacrifice while the other only knows how to take, that's not love, that's exploitation. The second lesson: don't let the word family become chains that bind you. Family is important, but family doesn't mean you have to accept all wrongdoing just because the person doing it shares blood with you. When someone destroys your property, insults you, and doesn't respect you, they've lost the right to be called family. The third lesson: protect what you've worked hard to achieve. Your success is the result of sweat and tears, sleepless nights, and times you fell and got back up. Don't let anyone, even family members, have the right to look down on or destroy those achievements. My current life is quite happy and peaceful. My company continues to grow. I have Mom by my side, and I'm gradually rebuilding my life. However, sometimes I still hear stories people tell about me. Those are relatives gossiping about the story of me suing my dad in court. Some people say I did the right thing. They think I had the right to protect my property, and no one should be allowed to destroy what I worked hard to achieve. Others blame me for being too cruel when suing my own father. They say that no matter how wrong Dad was, I shouldn't have taken him to court and made him sell his house. Some even say I'm the reason my parents got divorced, leading to the family falling apart. They think that if I had given in and let Liam borrow the car, none of this would have happened. What about you? After hearing me tell this story, do you think I'm the reason the family fell apart? Or did I do the right thing? Please leave your thoughts in the comments section below this story. And if this story has touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this story with the people around you. Thank you for following this long story. See you in the following stories.